The agenda is sponsored by Newcastle County Government.
Following the United States' rushed exit from its decades-long occupation of Afghanistan, evacuation efforts left Afghanistan civilians in limbo. Between the Taliban's encroachment and their risk of fleeing their home country, Biden's cabinet is working to build up the broken immigration infrastructure that Trump's presidency has left. Hi, I'm Kerwin Gaines, and welcome to The Agenda. We're here in the Secretary of War room, neighboring the White House, waiting to speak with former Delaware Governor Markell, who is Biden's appointed administrator of the Afghan Refugee Resettlement. But before the interview, let's take a look at the complex history of American and Afghan relations. The country of Afghanistan has historically been pulled in opposing directions. Stay with the traditionalism of the past or move towards a diplomatic or more modern future. Throughout the Cold War, the country has struggled to establish an autonomous and functional state. A series of coups and widespread violence and a rapidly disintegrating revolutionary government, Afghanistan transformed from an isolated and peaceful country to a hotbed of international terrorism. Following the withdrawal of the Soviet forces in 1989, a traditionalist sect of Afghanis, soon to be known globally as the Taliban, seized the sophisticated weaponry left over from years of conflict past. As they consumed a greater part of the country, the United States posed an ideological and military threat to their new dominance of the region. On September 11th, 19 members of the Taliban carried out the largest tragedy in modern American history. In October of 2001, the United States invaded Afghanistan, and since then, with varying degrees of force, occupied the country. The United States remained in Afghanistan until August of this year, as Biden withdrew all American military personnel from Afghanistan in an ambitious 2-week evacuation. Left in the wake are nearly 8 million displaced Afghanis, about 20% of the desert nation's population. To date, the United States has evacuated 65,000 Afghan refugees and plans to accommodate nearly 100,000 by 2022 in a mission called Operation Allies Welcome. However, the road to asylum is not a simple one, as the refugees will face months of vetting, visa processes, and rehousing. This operation will be one of the most intensive mass immigration operations in United States history, and will demand extensive and complex cooperation between private, public, and federal agencies. Governor Markell, thank you for joining us on the agenda.
It's good to be with you.
We are here today to talk to you about the Settlement Act with the Afghani refugees. How did it all work out?
Well, I got a call from the Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House, and she said, I know this call is coming from out of left field, but the President wanted me to ask you if you'd be willing to serve as the White House coordinator for the resettlement of our allies from Afghanistan. And of course, I am incredibly honored to do so.
So what is your relationship with President Biden?
Well, I'm a Delawarean, and as you all know.
We know.
Yeah, so I so much respect the President. I so much look up to him. He was a political mentor of mine, as he has been to so many Delaware public servants, and I'm just so glad he's in the Oval Office, and any chance I have to support his work, I'm delighted to do so.
Outstanding. Now, this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, refugee resettlement action since Vietnam. How are we dealing with all of that logistically?
I have been overwhelmed by the support of people from across the country. As the White House coordinator, I work a lot with other government agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security. They're really the lead operational agency, and they're doing an incredible job. With the folks from the Department of Defense, because we have tens of thousands of our Afghan allies at U.S. military bases across the country.
And sorry to cut you off there, but what are those conditions like there on the base?
I've been to 2 of them, and what the military does in a short period of time is nothing short of amazing. I mean, they literally build these small cities. The conditions, in some cases, the folks are in barracks, sort of dormitory-like. In some cases, They are intense. They are anxious to be resettled as quickly as possible in the communities across the country, and we are as well. And so actually the resettlement process is quite involved. We're fortunate. We've got 9 major resettlement agencies across the country, 200 affiliates, working with veteran service organizations, faith-based organizations, and so many others to make sure that the resettlement process goes well.
Now, you were, for most of people that don't know, you were a governor in Delaware. Do you find that as a benefit in dealing with the logistics and bringing all these agencies together and working directly with the people? Is that helping you?
You know, I think being governor and being in business where I got to lead sort of complex processes and organizations is helpful. In this case, it's really such a big job, and the president wants to make sure that we bring a whole of government and a whole of America approach. And so I have felt so fortunate to have the opportunity to work with Afghan Americans across the country who have been here for years, with the veteran service organizations, with the faith-based communities, and with so many others. There's a phenomenal group called Welcome.us that just launched about 5 weeks ago. In addition to being an organization, it's also a website. I encourage people to go to Welcome.us to find out how they can help. And so having this opportunity to work across the government with external people as well, with mayors, with governors, people of both parties. You know, this is not a red issue. This is not a blue issue. This is about who we are as a people. And I think our veterans say it best, because our veterans are the ones who served overseas with so many of our allies from Afghanistan.
And formed relationships, long-lasting relationships.
They formed long-lasting relationships, and they saw firsthand, they experienced firsthand what it is that our allies brought to our efforts in that country. So when our veterans speak out loudly as they do, that we have an obligation to do a safe and dignified resettling effort for these Afghan allies, that's exactly what we have to do.
Beyond the website, a lot of these people have come to this country with nothing, and they didn't have much before. What are we doing to help them adjust? I mean, as far as provisionings go and education and things like that for their kids, and could you speak to that?
It's been really remarkable to see the generosity of the American people from all parts of the country, from all walks of life, in terms of wanting to be a part of the solution, both while these folks are on the military bases, but especially when they resettle. And the resettlement process has really picked up pace so far. Over 9,000 people have been resettled in October alone, around 7,000. And so when we see people going to communities across the country, the volunteers, the faith-based organizations, others who are working with them to help make sure the kids get enrolled in school, to make sure that the houses, the apartments have the necessary supplies, to make sure people feel welcome in their community. That's really what it's all about.
So from the communities, are you tracking the pulse of all this? Do you know what's going on with all these communities that have accepted people and at the bases and things of that nature? And is it favorable? Are things going well?
I've been so, I admire so much the work of people across the country at the bases in these communities. It's obviously, you're talking about resettling, tens of thousands of people, 65,000 this year, another 30,000 over the next year or so. And so it's a big job, and but the fact that we have the American people working so hard, along with government, along with the non-government organizations and the like, maximizes our chances of success. I mean, it's not smooth sailing everywhere, every day, for sure, but
hiccups are to be expected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people are worried. Some may be more than others, but in regards to vaccination and the health of the refugees coming into the country, what programs or process steps are set up for that?
Well, a lot, and so we put everything on pause for a 3-week period when we made sure that every Afghan is vaccinated for a whole range of potential diseases, including COVID, also measles. And so measles is the one that takes the longest for the vaccination to take effect. So we literally put everything on hold for 21 days after the measles vaccination. But
So is that hold like a quarantine or just a?
well, it's essentially, people were not moving either from the European and Middle East military bases, and people were pretty much staying on the U.S. military bases here until the vaccinations took effect. It's in fact getting these vaccines is a condition of their parole into the country.
So there's no pushback from anyone there from the refugee standpoint about getting the vaccine.
No, I think people understood
Yeah.
how important this was.
Now, I can only assume from a logistical standpoint that there's a phased approach going on here. We're bringing people in, we're resettling them, so on and so forth. Is that the case?
Right. So I think it's important for people to realize nobody flew directly from Afghanistan to the United States. Everybody went to one of a number of U.S. military bases in Europe and the Middle East. Okay. Before they were allowed to fly to the U.S., they went through a vetting process. We actually sent 400 Customs and Border Protection officers to Europe and the Middle East to make sure that they did this multi-layered screening approach, both biographic information, biometric information, before people were allowed to get on a plane coming to the U.S. They then come to these U.S. military bases. As I mentioned, we did have to put a hold on for to make sure that the measles and other vaccines took effect. But once they take effect, people are coming off. While they're on their bases, a lot of work is done. Not only the vaccinations, but also to make sure people get their work authorization. All of these folks will be able to work. Obviously, the kids will go into schools. But they leave, shortly after they leave the military bases, they'll actually receive their work authorization document. Work is starting to go on to connect them to employers. I think it's a good timing in the sense that there's so many jobs across the country, and there are a lot of employers who would like to hire these folks. And
especially now.
Yeah, and connecting to them to good jobs is really important as well. So a lot of really great work is going on at the bases, and then obviously once they get resettled into the communities, getting these kids in school, getting people connected to the local neighborhoods and communities is going to be really important.
So what is the goal, okay, in getting this? Is it to get them here forever, or is it and get them established in communities? Is it eventually for them to make a decision whether or not they want to travel someplace else and reside? Like, what is the goal of the organization?
Well, the goal is for us to provide a safe and dignified welcome into this country. Should people decide later that they want to go elsewhere, obviously they will have that right. But we want to make sure, we think the most important thing we can do is put these families on a path to self-sufficiency. Okay. And so, connecting them to a good job, getting the kids in school, feeling welcomed into the communities, finding a local mosque, all of these kinds of things that add up to quality of life. And so we want, just as generations of immigrants, generations of refugees have added so much to our quality of life, we believe that these Afghans will bring new ideas, new energy, fresh perspectives, and they'll enrich the communities that they're settling in.
Well, what's next for you once this is done?
Well, I'm all in on this role. The president has nominated me to be the U.S. ambassador to an organization called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. I have to be confirmed by the Senate, and hopefully I will be, but in the meantime, I am 100% focused on making sure we do a good job of this effort.
Well, we're confident that you're going to knock it out of the park, not only for yourself, but for Delaware, where everybody here is rooting for you. As always, thank you for coming on to the agenda. It's been a pleasure, sir.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let DART do the driving. DART First State provides transportation that is clean, safe, reliable, and affordable. Plan your trip and get real-time bus information with the free DART Transit app. Scan your phone to pay your fare with the free DART Pass app. So what are you waiting for? Try transit today. Visit dartfirststate.com or call 1-800-652-DART.
Auto accident, medical negligence, work injury. Contact Team Tice, your Delaware personal injury lawyers. Leroy Tice in Wilmington, Delaware, serving and supporting the people of Delaware. Call 302-489-2400. That's 302-489-2400. online at teamtice.com.
This message is brought to you by Newcastle County Government.
Many wonder, what is a variant? A variant is a mutation or a change in the genetic sequence of the virus. Some of our methods of treating COVID-19 become ineffective. If we were to simply get vaccinated, we could decrease the spread and the likelihood that a mutation would form in the first place. Let's get vaccinated.
Thank you, Governor Markell, for sitting down with us and talking about your role in the Afghani refugee resettlement. We'd like to thank you as Americans and Delawareans and everything that you're doing. But it's important that we bring it right back here to Delaware, especially Wilmington. We're going to sit down with Councilman James Spadola. He's going to talk about ethics in City Council, as well as with city employees and police quotas. So, Mr. Spadola, welcome.
Thank you, Kerwin. Happy to be here.
Hey, we're happy to have you here and happy to talk with you, especially now with all the things that you have going on and all the things that you've done. So let me get this straight. Police officer, community leader, council person. Tell me a little bit about that.
You know, 9/11 was a pivotal day for me. And it's really when I really got honed in on public service. Joined the Army after that, did a year in Iraq in 2003. And so when I came back, I was really focused on, what are other ways for me to serve? So jumping into law enforcement and enjoyed my time with Newark for just under a decade. Really focused on community policing and, ways to give back. So that led to, opportunity in politics, led to the Housing Authority that I was the board chair for some time. And now I'm on council.
You have recently supported an ordinance that requires ethics training for city personnel, law enforcement, and even fellow council people. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So as part of our onboarding for city council, we underwent ethics training. It was basically an hour-long presentation from the Ethics Commission.
And this is training, sorry to cut you off, that most people probably get at their jobs, right?
You would think. Yes, great point. Right. We'll come back to that. But yeah, it was basically all about, the whole point of the Ethics Commission is to prevent council members and the mayor and the treasurer, the city treasurer, from ending up on the front page of the newspaper due to an unintentional mistake. And so the ethics training consists of learning about potential conflict of interest, abuse of office, and what most importantly, because Delaware is so small, if there's a conflict of interest that arises, how to handle it. What to do in that situation.
Now, are they obligated to obtain that training? So to me, I'm thinking if I'm dealing with anything contractually, okay, you have a responsibility to be educated in all things ethical in regards to contracts and negotiations, but you also have a responsibility from the city's perspective to ensure that those people are trained up not just at the time of their initial employment or onboarding, but ongoing throughout their career within that position.
Exactly.
And that is not the case, is what you're explaining.
That is not the case.
Okay.
So this ordinance would, one, make it law for all city employees to receive that training, and for the elected officials that would generally only get it once every 4 years, or upon an inauguration, we will get an annual refresher in the abuse of office, conflict of interest, the ethics training as a whole. Just because, one, people forget things. But more importantly than that, it's very important for elected officials to have ethics ever present in our mind and in our everyday life, especially when dealing with the city's purse strings.
Right. I see ethics as a muscle in your body that has to be constantly exercised. And it could be as easy as getting the wrong change at Wawa and saying, hey, something's wrong here, to awarding a $3 million contract to a developer in the area or what have you in the city, just giving an example there and what they do with it. It isn't something that is just a one-time thing.
The big, one thing that, and you've touched on it, at Chemours, DuPont, at big corporations, people would just assume this is taking place. Right. Everybody, in the military, you have your annual sexual harassment training, equal opportunity training. I think when you're dealing with millions and millions of dollars, that ethics training, the backbone, the muscle, like that needs to be refreshed upon time and time again.
I'm trying to figure out how to put this gently, okay? You're a very intelligent person. You have done a lot of things dealing with ethics, from law enforcement to armed services. Was there something that made you step forward with this? Because this, I mean, politics and ethics, that's sometimes, unfortunately, it's a fine line. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. So was there an incident that made you say, hey, this needs to be brought to your attention? Or were there several incidents and you just finally raised your hand and said, we at least need to have a ground floor, right? We need to start building something to ensure that our constituents are getting the best treatment they possibly can.
Yeah, I think, the more we can prevent bad press for the city, bad press for council members, my colleagues, I think we all win. I think it's harmful to the residents, it's harmful to the taxpayers for an elected official to be on the front page of the newspaper for an ethical lapse.
Here on the agenda, Kerwin's perspective, I'm always trying to whittle down, how does this affect me as a constituent, as a taxpayer? And if it's basically numbers, yes. I want to save as much money as we possibly can.
Great point. And I think, sometimes you might read something that happened elsewhere in the country, and you just get angry. You just get angry at the system. Like, how could that jerk vote on that contract when his brother was getting a piece of the action or something like that?
Absolutely.
I think the taxpayers in Wilmington can sleep a little sounder knowing that the mistake of that should be greatly reduced, because we are trained up on that. If somebody's still, knowing they're making an ethical lapse, still pushes for a conflict of interest, well, shame on them.
Let's change topics for a second. Sure. Another big topic, you were talking about the anger that constituents can feel about certain issues that may happen in their community. Another big issue that you're dealing with is quotas in law enforcement. Now, we're coming off of a very hot year, right? 2020, I can't even describe, 2020 should be a curse word in my vocabulary, right? I did a 2020 yesterday. But we've had a lot of issues when it comes to law enforcement. We've had guests on the show to talk about, equity within law enforcement. And your ideas are, well, let's remove, for the city of Wilmington, for the city of Wilmington, let's remove quotas from law enforcement, whether that be traffic or what have you, and begin that discussion. Now, some people may say, how are you protecting me? Law enforcement may say, well, it's my job. Now, you wore the badge. You wore the gun. You were out there in the street doing these things. What has made you sponsor this?
Sure. So,
this idea.
Yeah. So I should say one caveat to all that. I don't, the administration would say that Wilmington did not have a quota system. And I'm
productivity issue.
Yeah.
Okay,
and I'm happy to, but I think by banning them in the city, wherever, it removes the perception of their existence, which is important for police community relations as well. But I think, when we think about the problems of law enforcement, I'm somebody who considers myself a supporter of police, as a former cop. But I know that there's things we can do better. And I think an unintentional consequence of police chiefs and police administrations pushing productivity is that officers are out there looking for arrests, whether it's traffic, whether
it's their job.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their job.
Yeah.
That's why we hired them.
I think that's the conversation should be, what is the role of the police? To me, it's to serve the community and solve problems as much as possible. Yeah. If an arrest is part of that equation, great. If it needs to be, okay? But if it doesn't, and there's a better way, and we can prevent someone from getting tossed into the criminal justice system, well, that's preferred. That's the way to go. Some arrests are going to happen. That's okay. That's the criminal justice system. But if an officer thinks he can serve better by not making an arrest, whether it's talking to the parents, possibly spending more time than it would take to make the arrest, but working harder to really solve the problem. That's, I think, what we need.
So are you saying that we are dealing more with, I guess you could say, we're not getting rid of proactive policing, because when it's
Correct.
proactive
Absolutely.
policing, I'm thinking of someone running radar.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of someone through investigation that's on foot patrol, stumbles upon something, investigates, finds a problem. You are not saying let's end proactive policing.
No.
What I'm getting from you is you're saying more or less, let's protect officers that are making a decision that is not necessarily, I guess, related to issuing a citation or an arrest. Let's give them the leeway to make a decision that could benefit someone in the community, but then have them not be penalized for a lack of productivity that would further be shown through issuing a citation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's protect and promote officers' ability to use their training and discretion. That's what this is about. I think when you tell an officer they have to go make 2 arrests a day, you're removing their discretion, because you know what they're going to do? They're going to make their 2 arrests a day.
And those issues can stem problems.
Exactly.
Huge problems.
Exactly.
That balloon into other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very easily, very quickly. And I don't know how we could do that and tell that through a census or the Uniform Crime Report and really break down what it is. But so many incidents that police officers run into, and I'm sure that you have your own stories, that could have been prevented just if there was no contact. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of, quotas in general, they incentivize adversarial encounters in the first place. And I think, by removing them from the equation, if an officer wants to run radar and write speeding tickets because they think, that speeding ticket needs to be issued, okay. If perhaps maybe they can speak with the person driving and counsel them on, the hazards of unsafe driving, maybe that's the better solution. Let's give them that option though, because otherwise, if you mandate them to do something, they'll do it, and it's going to flare up those encounters that we're talking about. And the officer, I know what it's like to be, when you're in that position and you feel pressured to make an arrest, you're agitated because your bureaucracy is pushing you to do that in the first place. And so that's not a good way to have that demeanor when you're making that arrest. And then the person doesn't want to get arrested.
So did you come to this decision briefly, and I agree with you, because you're monitoring the pulse of the community? And is this feedback that you've received from, I guess, other community leaders saying, hey, look, if we could cut back on this, this may go down? Yeah,
so because quotas were not, they were not a plague to the police department by any means in Wilmington. But there's always that subconscious pressure to make arrests in any police department. And I think by banning quotas, we send the message that you are more than the arrest you make, officer. You are how you serve your community, how you conduct yourself, not just the 20 stop sign tickets that you made or the speeding tickets that you wrote.
I agree. But I do think that proactive policing does serve a role.
Absolutely.
Finding that balance is extremely difficult, and I wish the city the best luck they can in trying to figure that out. But I think that if they succeed, and if you succeed, this could be beneficial to the community. Yeah. Thank you for joining us on The Agenda. Next time, bring your guitar, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next week on The Agenda.